Fujifilm is bringing out this new entry-level camera in 2024, and you have to know that Fujifilm cameras are always quite expensive, even for entry-level cameras. But there have been two new revelations that show that this new entry-level camera will be more advanced than any of us had imagined, and therefore also more expensive. This camera will be the successor to the X-T30 Mark II, which has kind of been Fujifilm's entry-level model ever since the X-T200 was discontinued, together with the XE4 as well as the XS20 of some sorts. And all of these cameras have been sold for just under €1,000, which could be considered entry-level price for Fujifilm cameras. It will be called the X-T50, and there are a couple of routes Fujifilm could go down, so nothing is really set in stone yet. Though through a newly confirmed rumor by the blog Fuji Rumors, there are now two features that we know of that will significantly impact the price as well as the standing of this camera within the Fujifilm X system. Firstly, something that I've already touched on in a previous video where I talked about this camera together with a new kit lens that will be released in conjunction. I said that this camera will likely have in-body image stabilization, a feature that has usually been exclusive to Fujifilm's higher tier models. But as this new kit lens that will most likely be released together with the X-T50 will not feature optical image stabilization, the camera will have to feature some sort of stabilization. And it has been confirmed this new camera will feature in-body image stabilization. A good idea in my opinion, not just for a video, but also for photography in dark conditions. And the second revelation is something that kind of caught me by surprise, because this new camera will feature the X-Trans 5 40 megapixel sensor. This is a significant upgrade and even something that the XS20, which came out in the middle of 2023, did not feature. Though I'm a bit torn on this decision to implement the 40 megapixel sensor on an entry-level camera, because it kind of seems a bit overkill. Of course, it's an amazing feature, but it will also obviously increase the price of this new camera. I am honestly just happy that they decided to implement IBIS as well as the 40 megapixel sensor, because honestly having such a high megapixel sensor without any sort of stabilization would make it really hard to get crisp, clean shots. There are of course plenty of features that haven't been confirmed nor denied yet that play a big part of where this camera stands within the Fujifilm lineup. Firstly, a feature that has always been exclusive to Fujifilm's top-of-the-line products is weather resistance. Basically pushing you towards buying the more expensive product if you want to be able to shoot in any condition. So I'm not sure how expensive it would be for Fujifilm to implement weather resistance on this new camera, but even if it's not that expensive, I could see Fujifilm not doing it merely for this camera to be able to differentiate itself from the X-T5, for example. Then another factor that makes or breaks this camera's ability to reliably shoot professional work like weddings, for example, which is this camera having 1 or 2 card slots. Just like with most other features, you would have to go with the higher, more expensive product to kind of unlock this feature of having 2 card slots. And well, the reason to have 2 card slots on your camera is basically so you can save every picture on both cards, so if one card should break, you always have a backup. Because one of the worst things that could happen is when you're shooting a paid gig and your SD card breaks and you don't have any pictures to give to your clients. Thirdly, something that I think Fujifilm has done on every camera so far is whenever they have a new processor, they put it in all the cameras that are released after. So I'm sure this new X-T50 will also feature the X-Trans 5 processor, which basically just makes for faster processing speed as well as better autofocus. Then the viewfinder. The Fujifilm X-T30 Mark II had a viewfinder with a 0.93 magnification ratio and a 2.36 million dots resolution. This is, from all accounts I've heard, plenty for a camera that is being used in a casual setting. But of course it is possible that Fujifilm decides to implement the viewfinder that is found on the X-T5, which has a 1.2 magnification ratio with 3.69 million dots resolution. Again, it would be a significant upgrade, but would come to the detriment of an increased price on this new camera. And then something that I would really like to see that I don't think would be too expensive is to put on a bigger battery in this camera, just like the one that was first found on the X-T4. With this new X-Trans 5 processor, the camera would be even more energy efficient. Basically means that you could go an entire day without changing your battery once. I would assume that they would need to tamper with the dimensions of this camera a little bit, but honestly the downside of having a few more millimeters of thickness I think is a downside that most of us would accept if we would get a bigger battery. So about that professional work, as mentioned earlier, I think the only feature a camera really needs to be used in a professional setting is that ability to feature 2 card slots so you can save all pictures on both cards at the same time. If this new X-T50 has this feature, I don't see anything standing in the way of this camera being used in a professional setting. All the other features that modern cameras have, and this camera could have, are nice to have, but I don't think they're completely necessary in that sense. 2 more features that would greatly benefit the work with this camera are a new sensor and a new processor, which would improve and speed up the autofocus, and we know these features are both coming. Now, if this camera is primarily targeted at casual users, I don't really see why the 40 megapixel sensor in this camera is really necessary. Because it drives the price up quite a bit, and honestly 26 megapixels are enough for most shooters anyway. Of course it's nice to have, but if all of those previously mentioned features are implemented in this new camera, it will just seem unnecessarily expensive. For cropping in post, the 40 megapixels are definitely a great benefit, but I think it would be best practice to always try to get the shot right in the field. But that's just my opinion. So how much will this camera actually cost when it comes out? I think there are 2 options that Fujifilm has with the pricing. Option number 1, they could put all the previously mentioned features, mostly weather resistance, 2 card slots, a bigger battery, and a new EVF in this camera. But then it would definitely compete with the Fujifilm X-T5, be in that price range, maybe even more expensive. I don't think it would take away that much from the sales of the Fujifilm X-T5 as people may think, because for a lot of people having this bigger camera doesn't just come with the benefits of more features, but also that it's just handier to carry around. The second option, and in my opinion the option that is more likely, is that they only change the confirmed features, mainly IBIS and the new sensor, probably the processor as well, and leave everything else the same, just as it was on the X-T30 Mark II. That way this camera would still be quite a lot more expensive than the X-T30 Mark II, but not quite on the level of the X-T5. But honestly, as mentioned, I don't think this camera will be a true entry-level camera in terms of price anymore. Because with this previously mentioned option number 2, I think this camera would at least cost 1,200 to 1,400 euros still. Now, if you want to find out more about this new kit lens that this camera will most likely be released with, check out this video right here.